File 15 of Farthest North, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sharon Riskadal. Farthest North by Fridtjof Nansen, Volume 1. Chapter 7. The Spring and Summer of 1894, Part 1. So came the season which we at home call spring, the season of joy and budding life, when nature awakens after her long winter sleep. But there it brought no change. Day after day we had to gaze over the same white, lifeless mass, the same white, boundless ice plains. Still we wavered between despondency, idle longing, and eager energy, shifting with the winds as we drift forwards to our goal or are driven back from it. As before, I continued to brood upon the possibilities of the future and of our drift. One day I would think that everything was going on as we hoped and anticipated. Thus, on April 17th, I was convinced that there must be a current through the unknown polar basin, as we were unmistakably drifting northwards. The midday observation gave 80 degrees 20 minutes northeast, that is 9 minutes since the day before yesterday. Strange, a north wind of 4 whole days took us to the south, while 24 hours of this scanty wind drifts us 9 minutes northwards. This is remarkable. It looks as if we were done with drifting southwards. And when, in addition to this, I take into consideration the striking warmth of the water deep down, it seems to me that things are really looking brighter. The reasoning runs as follows. The temperature of the water in the East Greenland current, even on the surface, is nowhere over zero, the mean temperature for the year, and appears generally to be -1 degree Celsius, 30.2 degrees Fahrenheit, even in 70 degrees north latitude. In this latitude the temperature steadily falls as you get below the surface. Nowhere at a greater depth than 100 fathoms is it above -1 degree Celsius, and generally from -1.5 degrees, 29.30 degrees Fahrenheit, to -1.7 degrees Celsius, 28.94 degrees Fahrenheit, right to the bottom. Moreover, the bottom temperature of the whole sea north of the 60th degree of latitude is under -1 degree Celsius. A strip along the Norwegian coast and between Norway and Spitzbergen alone excepted, but here the temperature is over -1 degree Celsius, from 86 fathoms, 160 meters downward, and 135 fathoms, 250 meters, the temperature is already plus 0.55 degrees Celsius, 32.99 degrees Fahrenheit, and that too, be it remarked, north of the 80th degree of latitude, and in a sea surrounding the pole of maximum cold. This warm water can hardly come from the Arctic Sea itself, while the current issuing thence towards the south has a general temperature of about -1.5 degrees Celsius. It can hardly be anything other than the Gulf Stream that finds its way hither, and replaces the water which in its upper layers flows towards the north, forming the sources of the East Greenland polar current. All this seems to chime in with my previous assumptions, and supports the theory on which this expedition was planned. And when, in addition to this, one bears in mind that the winds seem, as anticipated, to be as a rule southeasterly, as was moreover the case at the international station at Sagaster by the Lennemouth, our prospects do not appear to be unfavorable. Frequently, moreover, I thought I could detect unmistakable symptoms of a steadily flowing northwesterly current under the ice, and then, of course, my spirits rose. But at other times, when the drift again bore southwards, and that was often, my doubts would return, and it seemed as if there was no prospect of getting through within any reasonable time. Truly such drifting in the ice is extremely trying to the mind, but there is one virtue it fosters, and that is patience. The whole expedition was in reality one long course of training in this useful virtue. Our progress as the spring advanced grew somewhat better than it had been during the winter, but on the whole it was always the same sort of crab-like locomotion, for each time we made a long stretch to the north, a longer period of reaction was sure to follow. It was, in the opinion of one of our number, who was somewhat of a politician, a constant struggle between the left and right, between progressionists and recessionists. After a period of left wind and a glorious drift northwards, as a matter of course, the radical right took the helm, and we remained lying in dead water or drifted backwards, thereby putting Amundsen into a very bad temper. It was a remarkable fact that during the whole time the Fram's bow turned towards the south, generally south 1/4 west, and shifted but very little during the whole drift. As I say on May 14th, she went backwards towards her goal in the north with her nose ever turned to the south. It is as though she shrank from increasing her distance from the world, as though she were longing for southern shores, while some invisible power is drawing her on towards the unknown. Can it be an ill omen, this backward advance towards the interior of the Polar Sea? I cannot think it. Even the crab ultimately reaches its goal. A statement of our latitude and longitude on different days will best indicate the general course of our drift. May 1st, 80° 46' north latitude. May 4th, 80° 50'. May 6th, 80° 49'. May 8th, 80° 55' north latitude, 129° 58' east longitude. May 12th, 80° 52' north latitude. May 15th, 129° 20' east longitude. May 21st, 81° 20' north latitude, 125° 45' east longitude. May 23rd, 81° 26' north latitude. May 27th, 81° 31'. June 2nd, 81° 31' north latitude, 121° 47' east longitude. June 13th, 81° 46'. June 18th, 81° 52'. Up to this we had made fairly satisfactory progress towards the north, but now came the reaction. June 24th, 81° 42'. July 1st, 81° 33'. July 10th, 81° 20'. July 14th, 81° 32'. July 18th, 81° 26'. July 31st, 81° 2' north latitude, 126° 5' 5 seconds east longitude. August 8th, 81° 8'. August 14th, 81° 5' north latitude, 127° 38' east longitude. August 26th, 81° 1'. September 5th, 81° 14' north latitude, 123° 36' east longitude. After this we began once more to drift northwards, but not very fast. As before, we were constantly on the lookout for land, and were inclined first from one thing, then from another, to think we saw signs of its proximity, but they always turned out to be imaginary, and the great depth of the sea, moreover, showed that at all events land could not be near. Later on August 7th, when I had found over 2,085 fathoms, 3,850 meters depth, I say in my diary, "I do not think we shall talk any more about the shallow Polar Sea, where land may be expected anywhere. We may very possibly drift out into the Atlantic Ocean without having seen a single mountain top, an eventful series of years to look forward to." The plan already alluded to of travelling over the ice with dogs and sledges occupied me a good deal. and during my daily expeditions, partly on snowshoes, partly with dogs, my attention was constantly given to the condition of the ice and our prospects of being able to make our way over it. During April it was specially well adapted for using dogs. The surface was good, as the sun's power had made it smoother than the heavy drift snow earlier in the winter. Besides, the wind had covered the pressure ridges pretty evenly, and there were not many crevasses or channels in the ice, so that one could proceed for miles without much trouble from them. In May, however, a change set in. So early as May 8th the wind had broken up the ice a good deal, and now there were lanes in all directions, which proved a great obstacle when I went out driving with the dogs. The temperature, however, was still so low that the channels were quickly frozen over again and became passable. But later on in the month the temperature rose, so that ice was no longer so readily formed on the water, and the channels became ever more and more numerous. On May 20th I write, "Went out on snowshoes in the forenoon. The ice has been very much broken up in various directions, owing to the continual winds during the last week. The lanes are difficult to cross over, as they are full of small pieces of ice that lie dispersed about and are partly covered with drift snow. This is very deceptive, for one may seem to have firm ice under one at places where, on sticking one's staff in, it goes right down without any sign of ice. On many occasions I nearly got into trouble in crossing over snow like this on snowshoes. I would suddenly find that the snow was giving way under me, and would manage with no little difficulty to get safely back on to firm ice." On June 5th the ice and the snow surface were about as before. I write, "Have just been out on a snowshoe excursion with Sverdrup in a southerly direction, the first for a long while. The condition of the ice has altered, but not for the better. The surface indeed is hard and good, but the pressure ridges are very awkward, and there are crevasses and hummocks in all directions. A sledge expedition would make poor enough progress on such ice as this." Hitherto, however, progress had always been possible, but now the snow began to melt, and placed almost insuperable difficulties in the way. On June 13th I write, "The ice gets softer and softer every day, and large pools of water are formed on the floes all around us. In short, the surface is abominable. The snowshoes break through into the water everywhere. Truly one would not be able to get far in a day now, should one be obliged to set off towards the south or west. It is as if every outlet were blocked, and here we stick. Sometimes it strikes me as rather remarkable that none of our fellows have become alarmed, even when we are bearing farther and farther northwards, farther and farther into the unknown. But there is no sign of fear in any one of them. All look gloomy when we are bearing south or too much to the west, and all are beaming with joy when we are drifting to the northward, the farther the better. Yet none of them can be blind to the fact that it is a matter of life and death if anything of what nearly every one prophesied should now occur. Should the ship be crushed in this ice and go to the bottom, like the Jeannette, without our being able to save sufficient supplies to continue our drift on the ice, we should have to turn our course to the south, and then there would be little doubt as to our fate. The Jeannette people fared badly enough, but their ship went down in 77° north latitude, while the nearest land to us is many times more than double the distance it was in their case, to say nothing of the nearest inhabited land. We are now more than 70 miles from Cape Chelyuskin, while from there to any inhabited region we are a long way farther. But the Fram will not be crushed, and nobody believes in the possibility of such an event. We are like the kayak rower, who knows well enough that one faulty stroke of his paddle is enough to capsize him and send him into eternity. But none the less he goes on his way serenely, for he knows that he will not make a faulty stroke. This is absolutely the most comfortable way of undertaking a polar expedition. What possible journey, indeed, could be more comfortable? Not even a railway journey, for then you have the bother of changing carriages. Still, a change now and then would be no bad thing. Later on in July the surface was even worse. The floes were everywhere covered with slush, with water underneath, and on the pressure ridges and between the hummocks where the snowdrifts were deep, one would often sink in up to the middle, not even the snowshoes bearing one up in this soft snow. Later on in July matters improved, the snow having gradually melted away, so that there was a firmer surface of ice to go on. But large pools of water now formed on the ice floes. Already on the 8th and 9th of June such a pool had begun to appear round the ship, so that she lay in a little lake of fresh water, and we were obliged to make use of a bridge in order to reach a dry spot on the ice. Some of these freshwater pools were of respectable dimensions and depth. There was one of these on the starboard side of the ship, so large that in the middle of July we could row and sail on it with the boats. This was a favorite evening amusement with some of us, and the boat was fully officered with captain, mate, and second mate, but had no common sailors. They thought it an excellent opportunity of practicing sailing with a square sail, while the rest of our fellows standing on the icy shore found it still more diverting to bombard the navigators with snowballs and lumps of ice. It was in this same pool that we tried one day if one of our boats could carry all 13 of us at once. When the dogs saw us all leave the ship to go to the pool, they followed us in utter bewilderment as to what this unusual movement could mean. But when we got into the boat, they, all of them, set to work and howled in wild despair, thinking probably that they would never see us again. Some of them swam after us, while two cunning ones, Pan and Kvik, conceived the brilliant idea of galloping round the pool to the opposite side to meet us. A few days afterwards I was dismayed to find the pool dried up. A hole had been worn through the ice at the bottom, and all the fresh water had drained out into the sea. So that amusement came to an end. In the summer, when we wanted to make an excursion over the ice, in addition to such pools, we met with lanes in the ice in all directions, but as a rule could easily cross them by jumping from one loose floe to another, or leaping right across at narrow places. These lanes never attained any great width, and there was consequently no question of getting the Fram afloat in any of them. And even could we have done so, it would have been of very little avail, as none of them was large enough to have taken her more than a few cable lengths further north. Sometimes there were indications in the sky that there must be large stretches of open water in our vicinity, and we could now and then see from the crow's nest large spaces of clear water in the horizon. But they could not have been large enough to be of much use when it came to a question of pushing forward with a ship. Sanguine folk on board, however, attached more importance to such open stretches. June 15th I wrote in my diary, "There are several lanes visible in different directions, but none of them is wide or of any great extent. The mate, however, is always insisting that we shall certainly get open water before autumn and be able to creep along northwards, while with the rest, Sverdrup excepted, it seems to be a generally accepted belief. Where they are to get their open water from I do not know. For the rest, this is the first ice-bound expedition that has not spent the summer spying after open water and sighing and longing for the ice to disperse. I only wish it may keep together and hurry up and drift northwards. Everything in this life depends on what one has made up one's mind to. One person sets forth to sail in open water, perhaps to the very pole, but gets stuck in the ice and laments. Another is prepared to get stuck in the ice, but will not grumble even should he find open water. It is ever the safest plan to expect the least of life, for then one often gets the most." The open spaces, the lanes, and the rifts in the ice are, of course, produced, like the pressure and packing, by the shifting winds and the tidal currents that set the ice drifting first in one direction, then in another. And they best prove, perhaps, how the surface of the polar sea must be considered as one continuous mass of ice floes in constant motion, now frozen together, now torn apart, or crushed against each other. During the whole of our drift I paid great attention to this ice, not only with respect to its motion, but to its formation and growth as well. In the introduction of this book I have pointed out that even should the ice pass year after year in the cold polar sea, it could not by mere freezing attain more than a certain thickness. From measurements that were constantly being made, it appeared that the ice which was formed during the autumn in October or November continued to increase in size during the whole of the winter and out into the spring, but more slowly the thicker it became. On April 10th it was about 2.31 meters, April 21st 2.41 meters, May 5th 2.45 meters, May 31st 2.52 meters, June 9th 2.58 meters. It was thus continually increasing in bulk, notwithstanding that the snow now melted quickly on the surface, and large pools of fresh water were formed on the floes. On June 20th the thickness was the same, although the melting on the surface had now increased considerably. On July 4th the thickness was 2.57 meters. On July 10th I was amazed to find that the ice had increased to 2.76 meters, notwithstanding that it would now diminish several centimeters daily from surface melting. I bored in many places, but found it everywhere the same. A thin, somewhat loose ice mass lay under the old floe. I first thought it was a thin ice floe that had got pushed under, but subsequently discovered that it was actually a new formation of fresh-water ice on the lower side of the old ice, due to the layer of fresh water of about 9 feet 9 inches (3 meters) in depth, formed by the melting of the snow on the ice. Owing to its lightness, this warm fresh water floated on the salt sea water, which was at a temperature of about -1.5 °C on its surface. Thus, by contact with the colder sea water, the fresh water became cooler, and so a thick crust of ice was formed on the fresh water, where it came in contact with the salt water lying underneath it. It was this ice crust, then, that augmented the thickness of the ice on its underside. Later on in the summer, however, the ice diminished somewhat owing to melting on the surface. On July 23rd the old ice was only 2.33 meters, and with the newly formed layer 2.49 meters. On August 10th the thickness of the old ice had decreased to 1.94 meters, and together the aggregate thickness to 3.17 meters. On August 22nd the old ice was 1.86 meters, and the aggregate thickness 3.06 meters. On September 3rd the aggregate thickness was 2.02 meters, and on September 30th 1.98 meters. On October 3rd it was the same. The thickness of the old ice was then 1.75 meters. On October 12th the aggregate thickness was 2.08 meters, while the old ice was 1.8 meters. On November 10th it was still about the same, with only a slight tendency to increase. Further on, in November and in December, it increased quite slowly. On December 11th the aggregate thickness reached 2.11 meters. On January 3rd, 1895, 2.32 meters. January 10th, 2.48 meters. February 6th, 2.59 meters. Hence it will be seen that the ice does not attain any enormous thickness by direct freezing. The packing caused by pressure can, however, produce blocks and floes of a very different size. It often happens that the floes get shoved in under each other in several layers and are frozen together, so as to appear like one originally continuous mass of ice. Thus the Fram had got a good bed under her. Yule and Peter had often disputed together during the winter as to the thickness of ice the Fram had under her. Peter, who had seen a good deal of the ice before, maintained that it must at least be 20 feet thick, while Yule would not believe it, and betted 20 kroner that it was not as thick as that. On April 19th this dispute again broke out, and I say of it in my diary, "Yule has undertaken to make a bore, but unfortunately our bore reaches no farther than 16 feet down. Peter, however, has undertaken to cut away the 4 feet that are lacking. There has been a lot of talk about this wager during the whole winter, but they could never agree about it. Peter says that Yule should begin to bore, while Yule maintains that Peter ought to cut the 4 feet first. This evening it ended in Yule incautiously offering 10 kroner to anyone who would bore. Bentzen took him at his word and immediately set to work at it with Amundsen. He thought one did not always have the chance of earning 10 kroner so easily. Amundsen offered him a kroner an hour, or else payment per foot, and time payment was finally agreed to. They worked till late on into the night, and when they had got down 12 feet, the bores slipped a little way, and water rose in the hole, but this did not come to much, and presently the borer struck on ice again. They went on for some time, but now the borer would reach no further, and Peter had to be called up to cut his 4 feet. He and Amundsen worked away at cutting till they were dripping with perspiration. Amundsen, as usual, was very eager, and vowed he would not give in till he had got through it, even if it were 30 feet thick. Meanwhile Bentzen had turned in, but a message was sent to him to say that the hole was cut, and that boring could now begin again. When it was only an inch or an inch and a half short of 20 feet, the borers slipped through, and the water spurted up and filled the hole. They now sank a lead line down it, and at 30 feet it again brought up against ice. Now they were obliged to give it up. A fine lump of ice we are lying on. Not taking into account a large loose ice floe that is lying packed up on the ice, it is 16 inches above the water, and adding to this the 2 feet which the Fram is raised up above the ice, there is no small distance between her and the water. The temperature on the ice in summer is about thawing point, but gradually as the winter cold comes on, it of course falls rapidly on the surface, whence the cold slowly penetrates deeper and deeper down towards the lower surface, where it naturally keeps at an even temperature with the underlying water. Observations of the temperature of the ice in its different layers were constantly taken in order to ascertain how quickly this cooling down process of the ice took place during the winter, and also how the temperature rose again towards spring. The lowest temperature of the ice occurred in March and the beginning of April, when at 1.2 meters it was about 3.2 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 16 degrees Celsius, and at 0.8 meter about 22 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, minus 30 degrees Celsius. After the beginning of April it began to rise slowly. At these low temperatures the ice became very hard and brittle, and was readily cracked or broken up by a blow or by packing. In the summer, on the other hand, when its temperature was near melting point, the ice became tough and plastic, and was not so readily broken up under packing. This difference between the condition of the ice in summer and winter was apparent also to the ear, as the ice packing in winter was always accompanied by the frequently mentioned loud noises, while the packing of the tough summer ice was almost noiseless, so that the most violent convulsions might take place close to us without our noticing them. In the immediate vicinity of the Fram the ice remained perfectly at rest the whole year through, and she was not at this time exposed to any great amount of pressure. She lay safe and secure on the ice floe to which she was firmly frozen, and gradually, as the surface of the ice thawed under the summer sun, she rose up higher and higher. In the autumn she again began to sink a little, either because the ice gave way under her weight, or because it melted somewhat on the under surface, so that it no longer had so much buoyancy as before. Meanwhile life on board went on in its usual way. Now that we had daylight, there was of course more work of various descriptions on the ice than had been the case during the winter. I have already alluded more than once to our unsuccessful endeavors to reach the bottom by sounding. Unfortunately, we were not prepared for such great depths, and had not brought any deep-sea sounding apparatus with us. We had therefore to do the best we could under the circumstances, and that was to sacrifice one of the ship's steel cables in order to make a lead line. It was not difficult to find sufficient space on the ice for a rope walk, and although a temperature of from 22° Fahrenheit below zero, -30°C, to 40° Fahrenheit below zero, -40°C, is not the pleasantest in which to manipulate such things as steel wire, yet for all that the work went on well. The cable was unlaid into its separate strands, and a fresh pliant lead line manufactured by twisting two of these strands together. In this way we made a line of between 4,000 and 5,000 meters, 2,150 to 2,700 fathoms long, and could now at last reach the bottom. The depth proved to range between 3,300 and 3,900 meters, 1,800 to 2,100 fathoms. This was a remarkable discovery, for, as I have frequently mentioned, the unknown polar basin has always been supposed to be shallow, with numerous unknown lands and islands. I too had assumed it to be shallow when I sketched out my plan, see page 24, and had thought it was traversed by a deep channel, which might possibly be a continuation of the deep channel in the North Atlantic, see page 28. From this assumption of a shallow polar sea, it was concluded that the regions about the pole had formerly been covered with an extensive tract of land, of which the existing islands are simply the remains. This extensive tract of polar land was furthermore assumed to have been the nursery of many of our animal and plant forms, whence they had found their way to lower latitudes. These conjectures now appear to rest on a somewhat infirm basis. This great depth indicates that here, at all events, there has not been land in any very recent geological period, and this depth is, no doubt, as old as the depth of the Atlantic Ocean, of which it is almost certainly a part. Another task to which I attached great importance, and to which I have frequently alluded, was the observation of the temperature of the sea at different depths, from the surface down to the bottom. These observations we took as often as time permitted, and, as already mentioned, they gave some surprising results, showing the existence of warmer water below the cold surface stratum. This is not the place to give the results of the different measurements, but as they are all very similar, I will instance one of them in order that an idea may be formed how the temperature is distributed. This series of temperatures, of which an extract is given here, was taken from the 13th to the 17th of August. Table of temperatures, depths column, temperature column. Depths and temperature follow. Surface 0 fathoms, plus 1.02 degrees centigrade, 33.83 Fahrenheit. 2 meters, 1 fathom, minus 1.32 degrees centigrade, 29.62 Fahrenheit. 20 meters, 10 fathoms, minus 1.33 degrees centigrade, 29.61 Fahrenheit. 40 meters, 21 fathoms, minus 1.50 degrees centigrade, 29.3 Fahrenheit. 60 meters, 32 fathoms, minus 1.50 degrees centigrade, 29.3 Fahrenheit. 80 meters, 43 fathoms, minus 1.50 degrees centigrade, 29.3 Fahrenheit. 100 meters, 54 fathoms, minus 1.4 degrees centigrade, 29.48 Fahrenheit. 120 meters, 65 fathoms, minus 1.24 degrees centigrade, 29.77 Fahrenheit. 140 meters, 76 fathoms, minus 0.97 degrees centigrade, 30.254 Fahrenheit. 160 meters, 87 fathoms, minus 0.58 degrees centigrade, 30.96 Fahrenheit. 180 meters, 98 fathoms, minus 0.31 degrees centigrade, 31.44 Fahrenheit. 200 meters, 109 fathoms, minus 0.03 degrees centigrade, 31.95 Fahrenheit. 220 meters, 120 fathoms, plus 0.19 degrees centigrade, 32.34 Fahrenheit. 240 meters, 131 fathoms, plus 0.20 degrees centigrade, 32.36 Fahrenheit. 260 meters, 142 fathoms, plus 0.34 degrees centigrade, 32.61 Fahrenheit. 280 meters, 153 fathoms, plus 0.42 degrees centigrade, 32.76 Fahrenheit. 300 meters, 164 fathoms, plus 0.34 degrees centigrade, 32.61 Fahrenheit. 350 meters, 191 fathoms, plus 0.44 degrees centigrade, 32.79 Fahrenheit. 400 meters, 218 fathoms, plus 0.35 degrees centigrade, 32.63 Fahrenheit. 450 meters, 246 fathoms, plus 0.36 degrees centigrade, 32.66 Fahrenheit. 500 meters, 273 fathoms, plus 0.34 degrees centigrade, 32.61 Fahrenheit. 600 meters, 328 fathoms, plus 0.26 degrees centigrade, 32.47 Fahrenheit. 700 meters, 382 fathoms, plus 0.14 degrees centigrade, 32.25 Fahrenheit. 800 meters, 437 fathoms, plus 0.07 degrees centigrade, 32.126 Fahrenheit. 900 meters, 492 fathoms, minus 0.04 degrees centigrade, 31.928 Fahrenheit. 1,000 meters, 546 fathoms, minus 0.10 degrees centigrade, 31.82 Fahrenheit. 1,200 meters, 656 fathoms, minus 0.28 degrees centigrade, 31.496 Fahrenheit. 1,400 meters, 765 fathoms, minus 0.34 degrees centigrade, 31.39 Fahrenheit. 1,600 meters, 874 fathoms, minus 0.46 degrees centigrade, 31.17 Fahrenheit. 1,800 meters, 984 fathoms, minus 0.60 degrees centigrade, 39.92 Fahrenheit. 2,000 meters, 1,093 fathoms, minus 0.66 degrees centigrade, 30.81 Fahrenheit. 2,600 meters, 1,421 fathoms, minus 0.74 degrees centigrade, 30.67 Fahrenheit. 2,900 meters, 1,585 fathoms, minus 0.76 degrees centigrade, 30.63 Fahrenheit. 3,000 meters, 1,640 fathoms, minus 0.73 degrees centigrade, 30.69 Fahrenheit. 3,400 meters, 1,859 fathoms, minus 0.69 degrees centigrade, 30.76 Fahrenheit. 3,700 meters, 2,023 fathoms, minus 0.65 degrees centigrade, 30.83 Fahrenheit. 3,800 meters, 2,077 fathoms, minus 0.64 degrees centigrade, 30.85 Fahrenheit. 325 meters, 177 fathoms, plus 0.49 degrees centigrade, 32.88 Fahrenheit. Plus 0.85 degrees centigrade, 33.53 Fahrenheit. Plus 0.76 degrees centigrade, 33.37 Fahrenheit. Plus 0.78 degrees centigrade, 33.40 Fahrenheit. Plus 0.62 degrees centigrade, 33.12 Fahrenheit. These temperatures of the water are in many respects remarkable. In the first place, the temperature falls, as will be seen, from the surface downwards to a depth of 80 meters, after which it rises to 280 meters, falls again at 300 meters, then rises again at 326 meters, where it was plus 0.49 degrees, then falls to rise again at 450 meters, then falls steadily down to 2,000 meters, to rise once more slowly at the bottom. Similar risings and fallings were to be found in almost all the series of temperatures taken, and the variations from one month to another were so small that at the respective depths they often merely amounted to the 200th part of a degree. Occasionally the temperature of the warm strata mounted even higher than mentioned here. Thus on October 17th at 300 meters it was plus 0.85 degrees, at 350 meters plus 0.76 degrees, at 400 meters plus 0.78, and at 500 meters plus 0.62 degrees, after which it sank evenly until, towards the bottom, it again rose as before. We had not expected to meet with much bird life in these desolate regions. Our surprise, therefore, was not small when on Whitsunday, May 13th, a gull paid us a visit. After that date we regularly saw birds of different kinds in our vicinity, till at last it became a daily occurrence, to which we did not pay any particular attention. For the most part they were ice mews, Larus eburneus, kittiwakes, Risa tridactyla, fulmars, Procellaria glacialis, and now and then a blue gull, L. glaucus, a herring gull, L. argentatus, or a black guillemot, Uriah grill. Once or twice we saw a squaw, probably Lestris parasitica, for instance, on July 14th. On July 21st we had a visit from a snow bunting. On August 3rd a remarkable occurrence took place. We were visited by the Arctic rose gull, Rhodostethia rosea. I wrote as follows about it in my diary. "Today my longing has at last been satisfied. I have shot Ross's gull, 3 specimens in one day." This rare and mysterious inhabitant of the unknown north, which is only occasionally seen, and of which no one knows whence it cometh or whither it goeth, which belongs exclusively to the world to which the imagination aspires, is what, from the first moment I saw these tracts, I had always hoped to discover, as my eyes roamed over the lonely plains of ice. And now it came when I was least thinking of it. I was out for a little walk on the ice by the ship, and as I was sitting down by a hummock, my eyes wandered northwards and lit on a bird hovering over the great pressure mound away to the northwest. At first I took it to be a kittiwake, but soon discovered it rather resembled the squaw by its swift flight, sharp wings, and pointed tail. When I had got my gun, there were two of them together flying round and round the ship. I now got a closer view of them, and discovered that they were too light-colored to be squaws. They were by no means shy, but continued flying about close to the ship. On going after them on the ice, I soon shot one of them, and was not a little surprised on picking it up to find it was a little bird about the size of a snipe. The mottled back, too, reminded me also of that bird. Soon after this I shot the other. Later in the day there came another which was also shot. On picking this one up I found it was not quite dead, and it vomited up a couple of large shrimps, which it must have caught in some channel or other. All three were young birds, about 12 inches in length, with dark mottled gray plumage on the back and wings, the breast and underside white, with a scarcely perceptible tinge of orange-red, and round the neck a dark ring sprinkled with gray. At a somewhat later age this mottled plumage disappears. They then become blue on the back, with a black ring round the neck, while the breast assumes a delicate pink hue. Some few days afterwards, August 6th and 8th, some more of these birds were shot, making 8 specimens in all. End of File 15